going to see if it works. I think YouTube just starts live. It doesn't give me an option. Yes, it does. We are live. Okay, give me
All
one
right.
second. I'm going to click the recording. All right, yep. And then it also makes me hear myself. Okay, cool. Now I'm just going to record on here and we're good to go. We are about to get official. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest was named one of the international top 3 transformational experts in her field. She supports people of heart and integrity around the world to live a full, passionate, successful, and unshackled life of love, awareness, and compassion without it costing them their soul. She had a 100% full, 100% referrals waiting list, only private practice in psychotherapy in Houston, Texas. She closed her practice completely because she no longer believed in any of the traditional and non-traditional therapies she was certified in. Years later, when she was reintroduced to the father of Eidetic Imagery, Dr. Asen, she knew she had found the holy grail of transformational work and jumped back into working with people and transformation. This practice, based on ancient Greek knowledge and 21st century science, uses the power of eidetic images to enable business people and creatives to unlock their full potential and remove the weight of old, often unseen vulnerabilities which have been holding them back. Welcome to the show, Wendy Yellen.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited about this. Anything old and ancient sounds amazing to me, so I'm excited to dive in, but I'm also a little bit nervous because I know I'm going to be your guinea pig. So who knows what's going to come up, but I'm definitely willing to play along and know about this work. So why don't we just begin with a little bit about your practice? You had a full practice. It was all referrals, and then you just pulled shoot and just did something else.
Yeah, I looked down. Sure. Let me tell a story that'll help you know a little bit more about me, and then I'll go back to the practice because they're related. So years ago when I was, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around then, my mother at that point was very influential in what clothes I was wearing. And I remember I grew up in Buffalo, New York, where there's tons of snow. And it was winter, and I was wearing this really awful dress that the hem was too long, the wool was too scratchy, the collar was too high, and I just looked like some old frumpy person, and I hated it. And I just felt like I wanted to burst out of my skin. So I remember going out to the yard in front of the school after school, and I had boots on. So boots plus dress, like even that made it worse, right? So I'm stomping out in the front of the school in the snow. I am not couth. I am not couth. I didn't even know if there was a word couth. I knew there was uncouth, but I didn't know if there was such a word as couth, but I knew I wasn't it. And that kind of over-restricted way that I was feeling in my own skin, that really defines me. Like I really needed to find who I was, what was really me, what was authentic. And I know that your listeners can really relate to that. So years later, I had what is supposed to be the height of success, right? And if you have your own business and all your business does not come from marketing, just comes from people saying, I love her, go see her. And you have a waiting list, and you never even think about bringing in anything that has to do with marketing or having to focus on new business. Like that's pretty amazing. And I really appreciated it. And I appreciated that people really liked what they were getting from me. But my focus as working with people back then, I was a traditional and non-traditional therapist, was on change. I mean, that's why people come, right? So, and people were changing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stayed, and they wouldn't have referred the people that they cared about. And I was participating in the same modalities that I was helping people with. So I knew I was also changing. I kept thinking, if there's got to be more than this, there has to be. And if there isn't more, I'm not going to do this anymore. So that's when I pulled the parachute, when I just jumped out of the plane, actually. And I just closed my business. I actually went to Japan for a few years with my husband. That's a different story. And then when I came back to the US, I got reintroduced to the work that we're going to experience today. And when I first heard about it 20 years before that time, I was so in my head that I really couldn't take in anything that Dr. Asen was showing us. The people around me they were going into these wonderful spaces, and you could see it on their faces and in their bodies, but none of it made sense to me 20 years before that. My head was so swirling around that I couldn't slow down enough to take in anything that wasn't just a thought. But 20 years down the line, I had softened some, and I was a little deeper into my body. And then, so I went to an introductory workshop with him that was a precursor for the 3-year training. And I'm sitting there and I'm getting it, and I'm seeing parts of myself that I had no idea were operating in me. After all the years of therapy I'd done, I had no idea. And I thought, this makes sense. This is why I feel so stuck, even though I hadn't understood this before. I was getting it viscerally, and I was also starting to open. So I said, wow, if this is really what I think it is, then I'm willing to go back and be a therapist again. And so I did take the 3-year training. I got certified. I flew from New Mexico to New York several times a year to do it. And then reopened a practice, but only in Eidetics and the work that we're going to experience today. Because just even though I have lots of certificates and lots of training, I let them go, because to me, this is for me. This does what I had really hoped was possible and for human beings.
Well, that sounds pretty amazing. I've explored a lot of the like self-help, personal development, that kind of thing. Maybe you've probably done a little bit more than I have. But when I'm looking at techniques and processes and whatever the case is, if hypnosis, NLP, imagery, whatever the case, if it works, if I get a result, then that's the one I want to use. So can you talk about some of the history of like where this comes from, what it is?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Well, Dr. Asen developed this as a psychology, as a spiritual practice, as a change agent, from understanding of the mind that the ancient Greeks had. Now, they were way ahead of their times in many, many different aspects of life. And the word eidetics also was used colloquially, so to speak, by the ancient Greeks to mean gifts from the gods. So the root is eidos, E-I-D-O-S, and it has to do with an image that's inside of us. Well, there's thousands. An image that's inside of us that also has feelings connected to it, and layers and layers and layers of meaning. The contribution of the Greeks, and they didn't use it as a psychology. Dr. Asen moved that into a psychology and a change agent. But what they did was they understood that the eidetic consciousness inside of us, it can bring to light the images that hold places that either there was trauma, or that we were constricted or crusted over by our history. And then what's so beautiful, and I hope we'll get a chance to experience this, is that inside the image is also, so there's this image, let's say, of something that doesn't feel good at all. And so the human mind wants to stop that. We want to control it. We want to have it. We're going to put another feeling that we think is a better feeling. But what happens with an eidetic image, if you'll, like we'll do later, watch and feel whatever is happening, the eidetic image underneath the problem underneath the constricted dress, so to speak, is the place of potentials that the person's been either looking for or many times has even given up on finding again in themselves or finding it all. And the image connects us. I could give you an example if that would help.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's like as me as the guinea pig, and we'll do that now.
Let me just tell a quick story. And
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm wondering. I'm just curious for the process because I'm excited to get into it. I wonder if it's different, same, um, or what the difference is. I've done a lot of this stuff, so when you're talking about those images, I have exactly those lined up. I'm curious if those will come up or if different ones will come up.
Okay.
Because
So
I've gone into my crap as intensely and as well as I can. So I'm happy to bring up those same ones, and I'm just curious in myself if I'll get new ones or if more layers will come out.
I'm so glad you said that, because the contribution of the way Eidetics works with the mind is the order in which you do things. So let me talk about people's spiritual practice just for a moment. So I was just working with someone really recently, one of my private clients. She's really likes to meditate. She loves doing like loving awareness meditations. She does yoga. There's all kinds of things that she does that to help her stay connected. And she says, sometimes I tell myself I want to feel a certain way. I know it's much better for me. I can get that way in certain one of my practices, but in the times when I'm not feeling that way and I try to kind of put myself there, I try to force myself there. She says that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like I'm trying to remember what I felt before so that I can have the feeling that I had in my practice. And she said, I don't like doing that because she said it feels forced, doesn't feel natural, and it actually doesn't work. And that's something I hear from a lot of people, that their yoga practice, their chanting, their spiritual practice, just for example, is one thing. And then something happens in life and they're reacting knee jerk. And they don't like it. They see it. They're watching themselves while they're doing it. And it's almost as if there's this rift, like the African Rift Valley, this humongous rift that they can't stand between their practice and their life. And that gets smaller. And then sometimes in a really difficult moment, they're just like feeling, oh, geez, I know this isn't who I am, but look how I'm responding to my partner again, right? Look what rabbit hole I'm going down again. Look where my monkey mind is going again, that kind of thing. So to answer your question, we're not going to start anywhere in where the mind has already gone in terms of what we know. And that is different. Now, you may get to some of the same images, but the difference between, let's say, visualization and eidetics is this. And I don't think you're talking about visualization, but just in case for those that are listening, visualization starts with a desire to feel a certain way and to see things in a certain way. We're not going to do that. We're going to go in from a different angle of the mind, a very different angle. And what would be wonderful if we can get things for you and for the audience, get things that we haven't gotten before. Because if all you get today is what you already know, what's the point of that? Right?
Yeah, 100%. And I like how you differentiated the difference between visualization and eidetics. So I think that's valuable. So you had a story that you wanted to go into, or was that the story?
I think let me just tell a story, because this is very practical work. There is, if my private clients, the people in my eidetic mastermind, they come to me because they want change. They look really good on the outside. All my clients look really good on the outside, but they want something more. They want something to shift internally. So who they're being in the world, often what kind of a difference they're making, how they're feeling, what they contribute in terms of their relationships and their work, that they want juiciness and life and real love, not lip service. So, for example, one woman who her spiritual life is really important to her. When she came to me, she'd done a lot of work in corporate, but she wanted to be an entrepreneur. And she had come from a history of really loving yoga, doing a lot of meditating, having a really peaceful morning where she actually was in Europe, and she would sit outside in a cafe and she'd have a cup of coffee and she'd watch people go by. She'd start her day in this beautiful, relaxed way. And she was really successful. She was taking wonderful vacations, several a year. And then she went and opened her own business, and all hell broke loose, which is what happens when you have your own business. You encounter the best and the worst of yourself, and you get a wonderful chance to work all that through. Your business will give you everything you need to work your stuff through. And it can be really hard. So she opened her business, and the first things that happened were her self-care stopped, and she started getting insanely distracted. She knew what to do, and she didn't do it. And then, of course, the business wasn't succeeding. She lost her mornings. Her friends said, "Where are you? I never see you anymore." She was working, as much 24/7 as is humanly possible. And she was really unhappy. So we worked with the images on all those aspects. And now she's gradually been able to get some of her practice back. She's working with Fortune 500 companies. She's leaving the office 5 or 6 many, many times. She's cleaned up who her staff is. So she's hiring people who can actually help her. And she feels better, and she looks younger. She looks younger than she did a couple of years ago when we started. And people who haven't seen her in years are telling her that. So it's very practical work. And I'm saying that because what we're about to do is going to seem very, well, maybe not to your listeners, but can seem very strange. And yet it's meant to create change, not to put something in you that isn't already there. What this does is I know you're into the neurology of it, or the neurobiology of things. So we're looking at taking the neuronal pathways, and what the images do when you focus on them and spend time with them, they remove the brambles on the path and all the extra dirt and the rocks, so that the pathways are clear between you and who you are. And then what happens is you start to just find yourself being more loving, actually feeling it. And then the things you say to the person who you care about are different. And it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even think that. It just came through. Or instead of being distracted by shiny objects, you're actually doing what you want to do. And that's part of that's part of who we are. But it gets, again, crusted over by our history.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Well, I like the analogy of the neural pathways. I use that one a lot when I'm coaching and just talking about how you have this pattern. And so if you get stressed out easily, there could be any number of stimulus in the environment, but it's going to fire off that neural net. And then you're going to go down the slide of anger and stuff like that. And you need to learn how to nip it in the butt. And then so you break those pathways. So I'm curious to see what the process is.
All right. You want to go ahead and do it?
Let's do it.
Go in? Okay.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right. So I'm going to take a few notes too. So this is for you, Matt. And then people listening, as long as you're not driving, you can do this along with Matt. Don't do it when you're driving. First of all, it helps to close your eyes if you want to, but you can do it either way. And also you'll have a much deeper experience if you're not driving or distracted. So let's do a little bit of setup so you and everyone has a meaningful experience. Number one, we're going to think about, for you and everyone, to think about some place that you would love to have a shift in for yourself, some area of your life. And you can think about that while I'm talking, or if it already came through, you can tell me.
Well, so I'm just curious. Okay. So I'm in like a what would you call like a middle zone now. So I'm looking to like go create something, but it's kind of like a cycle in my life.
Mhm.
Um, so it's gonna be cool. I know that, but I'm focusing on like what's the next thing. So
Mhm.
shifting into like stationary space, but then sometimes the universe puts me in other spots. And then I guess abundance would be great. But I know it's also coming.
Mhm.
So I have areas of improvement. I'm like in this, like I surrender real hard and I know I'm really aligned. So I don't have like this, I don't have like anywhere that's like hurting, like
Okay.
abundance would be the needs for improvement most area.
Okay. Are you comfortable sharing what that means in your life at this point? Like where you're seeing you're in your own way. Like for example, my person who is, so many people are just go down the rabbit hole of electronics and then they don't do what they know they're supposed to do. But a more concrete example of where you noticing you're not doing what it takes, or it just doesn't feel totally aligned. It doesn't have to be an area of hurting. It can be just like a nuanced shift.
Well, one would be the one that I'm always working on would be like self-worth, self-love, and self-acceptance. Like this, that would be probably the most beneficial as far as alignment and stuff like that. Like I'm super aligned and I'm super
Yeah.
grateful and I'm super like I'm bang on. I don't think that I'm in my way in any way, and I'm open to seeing if I'm in my way at all. But I definitely wake up knowing that I'm really on point with where I need to go, and I get the signs. But I'm always open to upgrades. So that's what I'm trying
Yeah.
to figure out. But self-worth and self-love and stuff like that, that's a real thing that I'm going through as I
Mhm.
do the podcast and live life and all that kind of stuff.
Makes total sense. And would you say, I feel this way, I'm wondering if you feel this way, that part of our path and part of the human condition is that every time we go to the next level on whatever it is, then there are more doors opened for us to then go to the next level and then the next level and then the next level. Not just that you have to always be searching or better, but that there's once you go to a certain level, there is more that you can see, feel, and experience coming in than you could before. So it's always this expanding place. Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's what we're talking about here. It doesn't have to be, like I said, my clients look great on the outside, right? It's just like, where can we open the door just a little bit more? So self-love, self-worth, and self-acceptance. And that's a great one for today.
Hmm.
Great one.
Yeah.
And there's levels of that, obviously. All right. So everybody has theirs. Matt has his. Now, a couple sort of not ground rules, but ways that you can make this more meaningful. So number one, I'm going to give an image instruction that has to do with parents. However, underlined, bolded, italics, highlighted, this is not about memory and it's not about history, even though you're going to be seeing your parents. It's actually about what's going on inside each of us. So you and each person listening, that what you're going to be seeing, even though it's going to feel perhaps like history, it's not. We're talking about your consciousness now. I'm not here with your parents. I'm here with you. And you're the one that's going to be experiencing this. So we're not going to go into history or memory. And that's really important. Second of all, because eidetic consciousness is extremely wise, like many other parts of us, wise in the way that if you cut your finger and you keep it clean, it's going to heal all by itself. You do not have to do anything. It will heal itself. The eidetic consciousness is similar to that, but in our psyche. And so the way to let that wisdom come forward is not to control what you're seeing. So before, Matt, you asked, should I start with these or whatever? No, you don't want to start with any preconception of anything, because that will then be shaped by the conscious mind. And we don't want to start there. We want to start somewhere else, because the conscious mind will only give you what the conscious mind already knows. Okay?
Yeah, got it. No,
Okay.
I was just suggesting that when I go down the slide, I've gone down the slide many times in many different forms, and it hits certain points, and I'm just curious
Yes.
if it's gonna take me down to that space. I'm just aware of what those are.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. And it be that or something else. And
Yeah.
we'll go for you and for everyone else. We'll go with what shows up now. That's the big thing. Okay. Because your mind, your larger mind has heard the self-worth, self-love, self-acceptance aspect. So it's already going to work on this.
Yeah.
All right. So we can do this with, you can do this with your eyes open or closed. Here we go. See your parents in the house that you think of as a home, the house you grew up in. Now, whether they were divorced or if one had died, don't think about that. Just let your mind hear the instructions and let the image form on its own. I'll repeat. See your parents in the house that you think of as a home, the house you grew up in. Where are they? And what are they doing in this image right now? So I'm not asking where would they be? Where do you think they should be? I'm asking you to look at the image that you're seeing, Matt and everyone. Where are they? What are they doing? Now, this image should be from a time when you're growing up. So if you're seeing current or older, let it go. See your parents in the house that you think of as a home from a time when you're growing up. Where are they right now in this specific image? Look around and what are they doing? And then notice in this specific image, where are you? And how old are you? Take a look. Don't assume anything. Take a look. And what are you doing? And how are you feeling? Again, in this image. Now, as Matt is going into his, I want to say that some people will need a lot more time than I'm going to give you today. And some people will have already seen an image almost immediately. It doesn't matter. In the beginning, it took me forever for an image to form. So just let yourself see whatever you see and don't shift it. Don't try to make it more clear. Just let it be what it is. And then I'm going to make some suggestions to Matt. You can either watch his image or you can try the suggestions in your image. And then at the end, I'll show you how to have a more personalized experience. So Matt, you ready to show us what you're seeing? Okay, do it in the present tense so you're still looking as you see. First, tell us, where are they and your parents and what are they doing?
My parents are in the room where the fireplace is, and they're just relaxing, reading books.
Okay, all right, good. And where are you and how old are you?
I think I'm around 12 or 13,
Okay,
and I'm just chilling, watching TV in the other room with my sister.
and how old's your sister?
She's 11
She's 11, so she's just a tiny bit younger than you. All right,
or
okay,
10. Yeah, I think
10,
pretty 10.
10-ish, okay. Now, when you see your parents in the room by the fireplace or in the room with the fireplace reading books through your young eyes, when you see them the way they are right now, how do you feel?
I feel good.
Now, check out through the young eyes what good feels like right now. So you want to see like you don't need to make it stronger or less strong. Just notice the feelings and see if you can give me a little bit more information yourself too about what good is right now.
Yeah, and this moment is just content, relaxed, easy, safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at your sister there in the room with you, just see her. What do you see and how do you feel with her?
Feel good. My sister's my sister. Um, she's like lots of energy. So she's always like squirming around kind of thing, like ready to do something.
And that's what she's doing right now in the image, squirming or not squirming in the image?
Not squirming, but she's less relaxed.
Less relaxed. Okay. And when you see that, does that make you more squirmy yourself, or are you more or not? Because
No,
she's a little squirmy.
yeah, she's her own thing. She's fine.
How does it affect you though? Is the question.
Oh, it just keeps it the same. Like I feel like I know who she is and what she is, so I just let her do her thing. And if she needs anything or is gonna bug me, then that's just gonna happen.
Okay.
So
Okay.
she's
Okay.
it's like living with like a, you know, yeah, no, I don't know how to describe that in a way that's flattering.
Well, I think what came to mind is like it was living with popping popcorn a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's good. I'll take that.
Okay. So let's go back to you looking through. So you're 12 or 13. So you're a young man, becoming a young man, and you're looking at your parents. I want you to look at your parents. And you had said you feel content, relaxed, easy, and safe. So when you just keep looking at them through your young eyes, and tell us a little bit more what you see when you look at your father, when you look at your mother, what you're actually seeing, and then what's going on in your young body. And then I'll show you something about this that I think you'll like.
Okay. Well, my dad is just sitting there reading the newspaper. Does that a lot. And my mom is reading a book, and I'm sitting in like the king chair versus the TV is pretty much my dad's chair, and we're just watching a movie. So that's why we're relaxed in this memory. Definitely not all these memories are relaxed. Just this one's the one that came up. And because in the winter we would have fires. So that would kind of like we'd kind of huddle in the basement a lot of the time and be around the fire. So this is just particularly content memory.
Okay. All right, good. So this, I want to make sure this is a memory. And as far as I can tell, Matt, you're actually watching it. So it's alive, right? It's not just you're thinking about a memory, you're actually seeing it, right?
Yep.
That's really important, because if you're just in memory, then we'd want to make sure you're watching it. And I'm saying that mostly for your listeners. And by the way, a lot of you as listeners are seeing really negative images when you're looking. I'll talk to you about that later. So you mentioned, Matt, that it's a memory and it's relaxed, and not all memories are like this, but your mind showed you a relaxed, easy, comfortable, safe, content image. Really interesting, because what you said you wanted was self-love, self-acceptance. Would you say that as you continue to look through your young eyes, that in this image, those feelings are present? They weren't necessarily at all positive. All memories aren't positive, but in this image, are you feeling some of that worth and acceptance or not?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Okay. What's available here is that if you'll continue, so what are you continuing to, what are you seeing right now? Actually show us what you're seeing at this moment.
This is the same image.
Yeah. Keep looking at the same image. That's perfect to have it be the same image. And just notice what you're seeing, what they're doing, what you're doing. There may be differences that happen, and it may be the same. See if you can keep looking. And because you have the feeling here that is very close to what you're wanting more of right now, and it wasn't always like this, but it is this way in this image. That's why I'm asking you to do it. This is the neuronal pathway stuff, Matt. Okay. You don't want to force it. You don't want to make it happen, but as you look through your young eyes, it's going to clear some of that pathway. So that's why I'm asking you to spend a little more time.
Got it. Well, I just had and I'm in between, like, not wanting to force it because my mind can easily like make up all kinds of stuff.
Yes. I know.
So I'm just trying to let things drop in naturally. And so
let me say something about that. That's so key. The way that they'll drop in naturally is if you'll keep looking. You want the image to lead. like a racehorse. You want to give it free rein.
Got it.
What do you see?
Well, I got the addition of my dog, which is cool.
What's your dog's name?
Rufus.
Rufus. And where is Rufus now?
Well, he was coming up to me and wagging his tail, so I let him jump up on my lap, and now we're hanging out.
Okay. Now that's, of course, you remember Rufus, obviously in a very positive way. Now in the image, without trying to force anything, see him on your lap. See what's happening and notice first what you see and what you experience as your young self.
Well, just happiness. I love dogs, and I definitely love my dog, so it was like a double whammy.
Yes.
So yeah, just lots of love and friendship.
Yes. Now, and are you feeling it in your young body? I know you are, but I'm asking anyway. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What can you tell us what that love and friendship is feeling like in this moment in the image? Not generalized to you and dogs, but this moment.
I think describing that feeling, like anything, like love or something like that, it's like beyond words. It's just a feeling that goes through your
Yes.
body.
Yes, 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 exactly. It's really, really hard to put the right word on it because it's bigger or different than words. Yeah, absolutely. Anything you can say about how you, adult Matt, is feeling right now as you keep looking at yourself with the dog in this image and all of that's around you in the image?
Mm, adult Matt would be just happy just to have that memory and just to remember all that and all the. It kind of reminds me of just all the good times I had with the family and
Let me ask it a little bit different. Of course, it reminds you of good times. As you're watching through your young eyes, what, not trying to hold on to any feeling and not trying to go anywhere particular here, but as you keep watching, can you tell me what adult Matt is experiencing while you're watching? Like what's going through your body, or what are you most in touch with right this moment?
I just say happiness,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
happiness, and then it switches a little bit to sadness when I realize that the dog is no longer here.
Okay. So I'm so glad you said that. So we're touching happiness, and then the conscious mind goes back to a thought that the dog isn't here, and then we feel sad. So just for right now, let's take 5 more seconds, maybe 10 more seconds to watch your image. Stay with what you're seeing as opposed to going into thought, just for a few more seconds, and tell us what you're seeing. It'll probably be the exact same, but there may be some more nuances, what you're seeing right now and what you're feeling, as opposed to the thought or the memory of losing him. If you can do that.
Yeah, the image stays the same, and then it just kind of develops into me going out. I'm gonna go hang out with my friends.
Mm-hmm. And how do you look going out with your friends, and how do you feel?
Feel excited.
Yeah.
Love getting out and hang. I had great friends. I have great
Yeah.
friends.
Okay. All right. Great. So go ahead and open your eyes. I'm going to talk to everybody else about um, your images, which I'm sure were very, very unique. I know they were unique. And I want to talk about what we just did. But first, let's see. But let me talk, let me go over some things that happened for you in the interest of supporting your other people too. And then we can talk about what happened. When I first started this work, all I could do was think, and all I could do was, so what happened, actually, let me start in a different place. What happens with so many of us is that we have some positive memories, and then the other shoe drops, right? The dog dies, something different happens in our family, there's divorce, there's financial problems, there's a child that has more needs than we do and takes away, attention that we could have used or whatever it is. And our mind knows all this. And so the thinking mind, what one of my mentors calls the cracked end, the thinking mind goes into the memory. Oh, but that happened next. I'm waiting for that to happen next. However, without being contrived at all, your eidetic conscious mind, yours, Matt, just now took you immediately to a place of happiness and then later excitement. So happiness was in the family, and then excitement about getting to hang out with your friends. Excitement, calm, contentness. I asked you if there were aspects of like self-love and acceptance, and you said yes. So in this image, which is more than a memory because you are watching it, there are the seeds, the if you think about the neuronal pathway. So you're wanting to go here. This was something you knew how to experience. You experienced it many times, but you had other experiences too. Then you had the image, and the image is directly connected to those places as long as, oh, but the other shoe dropped. But that didn't happen all the time, because then we go off back into the cracked end. The work is to work with the conscious mind, which will keep interfering. And that's what it does. That's its job. Wait, this is what you're supposed to remember, because there are, gigantic man-eating animals out there, and you better be careful. But the eidetic mind keeps saying, come here, I got you. I got part of you right here. If you'll just look. And that's what you got some connections to today. They were real, small perhaps, but real. And that's why I kept asking you to go back and look at the image and not generalize into I love dogs, but to really be in the specific experience that your consciousness, yours, gave you. So I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea what you were going to see, but you told your mind, I want to feel self-love and acceptance. And it would have had a couple choices: either give you a place where you did have that, and you could have a chance to have it and keep moving opening those pathways, or probably for most people on this podcast, it gave you the place where you didn't have that, but it's waiting underneath. And again, I'll connect back to that later, because I know people are going to want to know that. But first, I want to talk to you and see, does that make sense to you? Do you have questions, comments?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I'm curious what the process would have been like if my unconscious mind chose a negative memory, and
Okay.
the layers and layers of that, because it's a totally different experience. And I think that the negative memories aren't so bad. It's just that we don't process them. So it's like you've got, one of the ways that I've heard it and I kind of like is that you go throughout the day, and your body's storing memory like a hard drive. It's remembering every single thing and everything you've ever done in the body. So that's why if you have trauma as a kid, you might get an ulcer or something later, because you have like 10 gigs of memory through this traumatic experience rather than a few, little experiences. So we don't go in there and kind of clean them out and understand them and make peace with them or resolve them or whatever the case is. So I kind of see it as like that. And then, from the practical standpoint of just, okay, if this is the thing that I want to experience, see what comes up. And if it's the positive, then it can create that emotion in that neural pathway. If it's the negative, then it can create the opportunity to resolve a pathway that prevents me, like a roadblock in the neural pathway that I need to get through so that I can experience more of those pathways and those feelings in the body.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And so your one of your questions, one of the there were many things in what you just said, of course. So let's go to what would have happened if you said if you picked. I would say if your eidetic consciousness chose for you based on not controlling the image, a negative image. So let's talk about that, because as I've said a couple times already, most people will have had a negative image just now. But what happens with a negative image? So let's see. One of the ones that when I first did this image, which is called the house image, it's one of thousands of different eidetic images, some of which come straight from the person, and some of which are there to reveal things and start out more generic, like I started out with you. This particular image is extremely helpful in showing you where you're stuck or showing you what you actually have there that feels less available because there's interference. Often is what will happen. So when I first started, I always saw I never see this image anymore, but my image was always that around the round dining table, looking at my father, and my stomach would be in horrible knots, so he's directly across from me. My mother's to my right, and then my little brother's between us, and my sister's over here. And I am sitting there, I don't know, maybe 12-ish. And I'm having it right now. My stomach is in knots, mostly at my father's coiled anger. And wow, I'm totally feeling it right now as I'm looking. And I see my mother, and my mother, I'm just going to tell you what I'm seeing right now, because that's what's happening. I'm seeing my mother. She's standing there. She's so beautiful. And she's calm in this image. This isn't particularly a specific memory, but her calmness and her kindness and her beauty and actually her warmth, which I'm stunned to be feeling right now, is not compensation and does not balance my father's coiled anger. I'm afraid as I watch. I'm afraid of what he's going to do or say. It's like, what's going to burst out of him? It could be nice things, but it could not be. And of course, I'm braced. And so I'm having a lot of anxiety as I look at him now. And I don't feel comfortable in my own skin. I don't particularly feel safe. And I feel like I have to protect myself. And I feel like I have to be on guard. And those are really familiar feelings. I've not so much now, but the protect myself. Let's go talk about relationships. So I've been with my husband for 40 years. And we haven't been married all that time, but between living together and being married, it's 40 years. And I used to spend maybe, I don't know, for several years, 60, 70, 80% of my waking time, thinking time, practicing breaking up with him, leaving him. I mean, verbal practice. I would say this, he would say this, and I would feel this, and then what would I do? I mean, I rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. It was like the quintessential example of going down the rabbit hole, the monkey mind, just horrendous. And I'm so glad I didn't do it, because I couldn't open myself to him before, not fully. I mean, obviously we stayed together, so there was connection, but I was way overprotected in relationship to him. And I couldn't enjoy him that much. He's really funny, my husband, and he's really smart. And I appreciate those two things, but I wouldn't laugh because he would just annoy me. And so I missed out on laughing, and I missed out on him. And I didn't work directly on my relationship with him. I worked in other ways, but Eidetics has positive side effects. So in the last couple of years, I've noticed that I noticed him singing to himself out loud. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if he has always been singing to himself and I didn't ever notice, or if he just started because we're together. We're so much happier, even though he hasn't, quote unquote, worked on himself or done anything different. I'm more available and I appreciate him so much more. So with you could see in that image, in that negative image, that I'm not available at all. The one at the dining room table, I'm anxious, terrified. My shoulders are at my ears. I'm protecting myself. And so, of course, that's what I would do in the world. So the work with me was around ways I was identifying with my parents and being like my father in my business. And I mean, I can go into all of that, but does that help you at least a little bit understand what happens with a negative image?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good example. And overall, like the arching theme that I feel like is just, going in and actually doing the inner work. Like no matter what kind of inner work you're doing, I think that it's extremely valuable. And the other thing that it makes me think of, have you ever heard of Win Wenger? His name is weird.
Yes. Yes, of course I have. Yes.
Yeah, and image streaming.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
he would have
Yes.
this he'd have this process where you will think about something. Well, you'd ask yourself a question, and it's a good
Yes.
process. I used to do it,
Yes.
and then you just record for a minute or 2 minutes or whatever, and just say what's happening, and you go through the unconscious mind, and you get it all out. So I think that filtering process is really important, and I think that what I'm curious about is, like, you have this background, a very successful background in therapy and psychotherapy, and all the diplomas are behind your head, and I sit down on the couch and you solve all my problems. Uh, so
No more
like,
diplomas up here. Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So what do you like for somebody dealing who wants to, I don't know, were the most, I'm trying to figure out the best question. What were some of the most common problems? Because I think we have common problems. And
Yeah.
what, if anything, have you found helpful perspectives, principles, practices that people can go through? So obviously you think the eidetic process is one of the most powerful processes. But what about like philosophies, and like, can they do this at home? Also, like if they want to go through, like they kind of did it with us. But I guess the biggest, most common problems and solutions and practices to overcome those problems.
Okay. All right. So the bad news perhaps is that you're right. I was trained in lots of different traditional and non-traditional therapies. So like psychodynamic psychotherapy, object relations, books that when you read them, they would make your eyes cross because they were written so thickly and they really didn't make. Anyway, they were very hard to get into, very, very hard. But very traditional. So I had traditional psychotherapy background from Smith College School for Social Work. And then that wasn't enough. So then I studied family therapy, strategic therapy, emotional release body work, all kinds of stuff. I let them go. I let every credential go, including being a social worker, when I found Eidetics, because for me, this is it. For me. I know that's not true for everybody. I'm just telling you, for me as a client, when I'm a client, and for me with my clients, I've never seen this level of shift in myself and in them. So that's my take. It's not going to be everybody's. Then in terms of common situations, so a lot of my things, it's probably best through stories, but things like confidence, quality, these are things that people say have come to them. Confidence, quality of commitment to what they want, not doing things the way they used to do. Not thinking the same way, not waiting till the last minute. Their heart actually feeling bigger. Their face, a lot of my clients get age reversal on their face because real change will show everywhere on your body. It'll show in your eyes, it'll show in your face, it'll show in the energy that's coming off of you, it'll show in the way you hold your body. Real change has to affect every aspect because we aren't divided, right? So people telling them that they're younger, looking in the mirror and feeling fresher, having more willingness to say yes instead of that automatic no. Or maybe the automatic no comes, but then there's space enough for the yes to emerge. Positive anticipation instead of negative anticipation. And again, there's so much pressure that people give to themselves right now to make themselves more spiritual or positive or happy. And then they don't really feel it. It's more of like, I wish I did, or I'd be better off if I did. And then the mind is struggling because they want something, and they're telling themselves to feel this way, but they don't. It's like, I don't know if you like Bonnie Raitt or not, but one of the songs, she's a singer and musician, and she says in one of her songs, you can't make the heart feel something it won't. And I'd heard that song for decades. And when I really listened to that word, I thought, wow, it's so true. You can't make your heart love. You hear of people where one person loves a person and the other person doesn't love them back. And no matter how lovely or kind or warm or loving the first person is, either the second person's heart is gonna feel it or it doesn't, but you can't make it. So I think that's really a truth. Other things that happen is that people say that it's like they took an anti-nervous pill. I'm actually reading some of the things that people have told me, that they easily handle situations that used to feel impossible or completely out of their range, or they easily switch gears, which is a really big one because we tend to go down the same path. So those are just a few. Does that answer your question, or am I you wanting something different?
Well, kind of.
Kind
I
of.
was kind of saying, like, if someone's listening to this and, like, we have common things, like one of the common things is self-worth. One of them is like
Yes.
increased confidence. And being, having like a therapy background and doing different forms of work. If we're making it more broad and someone's
Mhm.
listening and they want to have like a principle and a perspective, like how do they deal with, like, oh, well, you know what? Self-confidence was an issue. Here are some perspectives that helped, or people have this problem in relationships. That's kind of one,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
thinking of like how, basically, of everything that you've ever learned, like what tools, tips, principles, perspectives, stories do you have that somebody can apply right now listening to this to improve the quality of your life? Because I agree with everything that you're saying. These are common problems in the spiritual world. We have spiritual egos,
mhm.
and we have this, like, oh, I'm going to do the chakra thing, then I'm going to feel better, things like that. And I think it goes down to the roots of the problem of like self-worth, understanding, and ultimately one of the big issues you're talking about, one of your clients is, and from my perspective, and this is just my view, that you're only going to get to a certain level of consciousness if you're thinking about what you can get. So
Mm.
you have all this monkey mind going on, but people aren't aligned in their hearts. They're
Yes.
not following, they don't know what their values are. So that's one of the tips that I would give: know what your values are. Then what do you want to do? If you had $1 million every single day for the rest of your life, what would you do? What are you passionate about? What would you do if you only had 6 months to live? Getting aligned with those things and actually living them. And from my perspective, when you do those things, everything else starts to change a little bit. It's like the Zen perspective of before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So before you know what excites you about life and where you want to move, you're doing something, and then you know where you want to go, but you're still gonna have the same problems. And then that's really where I think that all that stuff's going to start coming up: the self-worth, the child trauma, the I'm not good enough story. I just talked to Tim Shields, and he just wrote an incredible book and is an incredible human and has finished the book, and he's still like kind of like processing a bit of that now, but still walking the path, but in a much more fulfilled way. So I think it's more like general overarching, just like
Okay.
philosophy on just self-improvement, because um a lot of people out there are hurting in many different ways.
Yes.
I think anxiety, depression,
Yes.
not being good enough, body shaming, all that stuff. So I
Yes.
think it's just generally like your thoughts on that field, and how
Okay.
people can find improvement.
Yeah. 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 Thank you for helping me understand more. You said a lot of the categories that people feel. I think you
Yeah.
covered it really well. I think the number one thing that I would say, which is really hard to take in, is that not to believe your thoughts. That a lot of your thoughts are going to take you down. Well, let me put it a slightly different way. That you are not only what you think you are, and your thoughts are determined for the most part, especially the really deep ones, by your history. And that includes family, society, school, and religion, culture. We're really shaped by that. And so our thoughts, which are repetitive, take us down a certain way. And there is so much more to us than that. I'm smart. You're obviously smart, Matt. I've gotten very far with my brain. A lot, I bet, I imagine, having listened to several of your podcasts, I imagine a lot of your listeners are really smart. And for myself, I realized at a certain point that my intelligence had taken me really far, but where I wanted to go next was not going to be just from my intelligence. So that's why I'm saying this. I didn't believe there was more to me than that at that point. Now I know that there is. So from my point of view, a lot of from my point of view, and where I am, not that everybody should be there or follow this, I'm just saying for myself, I want to address the deeper places. I want to go beyond what people beyond what a lot of people call the common wisdom these days, and really look at, and this is what I'm suggesting, an answer to your question, like really look at the truth of what a person's experiencing. So for example, if you're hiring a business coach and you're not doing what and you like them, and you respect them, and you feel like they're listening to you, and you're not doing everything or pretty much everything that they're suggesting, and you think those are good ideas, but you're not doing them, like really take a look at that, because that is what most people do. Even if they're paying a lot of money, just for example, or if you have a spiritual practice and there's a huge gap or even a pretty big gap between what you know is true in your practice and what's true in your life, be real, notice it. And then from that place, other things can happen. For me, the way I have helped myself and other people, I still do my own personal eidetics all the time. I use eidetics. Your listeners may be interested in that, or they may have their own ways of going, but be real. Like, let go of the talk and connect as deeply as you can any given moment, and know that what you think is true isn't necessarily true at all. I'll give you an example. Having a Facebook Live or now YouTube Live podcast with you is harder than just a recording that can get edited. We're working without a net. You and I have never met each other. We don't have anything to fall back on. We don't know who's listening. I don't know what they're going to experience. So I was definitely anxious about this. I know better than to try to calm my anxiety. That's not how I roll. I don't try to calm my anxiety. What I did was I went into an eidetic image, and that was this morning. It was fascinating. And it took me to a totally different place than calming my anxiety. It actually brought my energy. I won't go into it. It's very, very personal, but it brought my energy more to my back and to my femininity, actually, and connected me to myself in a really different way. And instantly gave me access to a different part of myself. But my conscious mind was saying, oh, you're anxious. Calm down, find a way to calm down, bring it, center yourself, ground yourself. But that's what my conscious mind thought. My eidetic mind showed me something that was so much more meaningful to me and really helped me become less anxious, but in a whole different way.
Well, I think when you shared that last example, what it made me think about is like giving control to a higher mind. And so I kind of had two thoughts of that. One is like, I like the Greeks and I like what they knew and where they were at. But two, it feels disconnected, and it may not be like, oh, here's the thing. When in that kind of idea, you could pray, You could ask Spirit, please help me with this thing, because but the main meat and potatoes is your consciousness is probably not going to do it.
Yes.
Now, with teaching athletes how to get in the zone, I think it's very possible, but it's a very different tactic. It's more of like a surrender type of tactic to allow the unconscious, the higher intelligence, something else that's not like, I call like the peanut brain, because your consciousness can only hold like something like 5 to 7 bits of information. It's basically consistently looking for threats. And as you look for threats, you can't really be processing all of this other stuff. So if you try to linearly like change your mind to get to a different state, it's very hard. You're kind of like, you're in a losing battle, kind of say, you know what I mean? It's very hard to like, oh, just stop feeling anxious. Okay, let me think my way out of this anxious thought. Let me think my way out of this depression. And we need a little bit of a different idea.
Yeah, because the thinking mind that's not its job. It doesn't actually know how to do that. But this part of your mind does, and not in ways that that I had ever imagined. I didn't know these things with my head. Yeah, I agree with you. I think, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. That's what I was saying too about, that just because you're smart and just because you think it doesn't make it true. And I listened to I don't remember his name, but the guy from Google that you interviewed,
Oh
right?
yeah, Mo Gaudet. He's amazing.
Yes, he was amazing. And he said something that, I've heard many times, so I'm going to repeat it since your listeners may have heard it from him too, is that just because we remember something, we think we remember it, we're remembering a minuscule part of it. A minuscule part of it. So let me give an example. I'll use my own example. For some reason, I keep doing that today. So my father was a very big thinker. Like one of the things he did was bring Habitat for Humanity to Taos, New Mexico. Like pretty much single-handedly, he rounded up all the movers and shakers in Taos and got them to start it. And now I don't know how many homes they've built, 50, 100. I mean, a lot of homes. That was his desire. He thought people have a right to have heat, right, in their homes, that kind of thing. And my mother was more of a person who would get things done. My father couldn't get things done. He just had the big ideas. So he went bankrupt 3 times. So, and my mother was always trying to corral him in and lasso him in and control him. And it always, from my young girl's eyes, always seemed like a good idea. Like Dad seemed way too out there, and he needed someone to kind of like, he was also ADHD, so he needed someone to kind of help him through. But what I saw in my images many, many years later, was that actually Mom's constant criticizing Dad was also taking away not taking away, it was affecting his confidence and his ability to do more. But my memory was that Mom was trying to help Dad. So what Mo was saying, and I'm sure you've heard it other places, like our memories are not truth. And yet we hang on to them as if they're the holy grail of what actually happened. It's not true. Much more was happening. We don't take it all in, and we certainly don't save it that way.
Well, that's a fascinating wormhole you just opened up in my mind, and I think for other people, because, well, when I lay it out there, it'll be out there for other people. But yeah, you can't trust your memory. And if you think you can, smarty pants, I want you to go and go out throughout your day and just remember what you did at like 4 p.m. 2 days ago with very vivid recall. When I was in I did police foundations and law and security when I was in college. And one of the things that they would tell you is that people don't remember anything accurately. Like they could have been wearing an orange shirt and they'll remember it as like, black, pure black or white. It just won't even be right. So how do you even like work with that information? And so also in your own mind, what is What's the term for it when you have a belief and then you basically just shape your reality around that belief set, right? It's just like you believe that, I don't know, something, dogs are nice. And so even if a dog bites you, you still think it's nice.
Yes,
You
I
know,
don't know the word, but I know it. I'm sure everybody knows what you're talking about.
yeah. So when you have a belief, what happens is we aren't really designed to like, we more want to pad our belief systems rather than challenge our belief systems.
Yes.
And then also looking at memory, very powerful stuff, because, you know, if you're remembering it as like the all truth, and what does that even mean? So we're only really like able to receive consciously such a small bit of the information. You know, when you do like Navy SEAL training, and I've looked up some of these tactics and researched them about like how they're able to perceive. They have these different zones of like awareness. And so it's kind of like that James Bond thing. I can remember in the spy movies, they'll be like, hey, you go, and they'll say, who is in this room? And they're able to like scan the whole room and have this whole another scale of awareness. Like that is some stuff.
Yes.
I've never gotten to the place where I can do that naturally ever. I've gotten to the place where if I try real hard, I can remember a lot more. But even at the maximum version of my best day, knowing when I get a coffee and at that moment, and if you stop when the coffee's handed to me, what my surroundings were,
Mm,
it's so minimal.
yeah.
And so then what? You want to add on to that? I don't even know where it's going, but like if
Yeah,
you're only
I do.
perceiving such a small, okay, go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then
What I
what?
want to add on to that. So this is really the insidious part of the mind. So you know that. A lot of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard that. So we know that the mind, the memory is the eyewitnesses, the memory there, it's so unreliable. And yet, what happens when somebody challenges us about something? Well, this is how it was when I was young, and I know I suffered it in this way. And yeah, but the thing is that so and so did this, and then so and so did that, and I know it was traumatic, and now I'm recovering from it. It's like, boom, this is it. This is what happened. And the we don't let go of it. And so I'll say, even like when you and I were working, what happened with your mind was I was so glad it was happening, even with like your dog with Rufus, because yes, of course, Rufus died. And yes, you loved Rufus, and Rufus sounds like he was a great dog for you. And the memory like grabbed on. So you were having a really nice connection. He was in your lap. I think you, in my image, you were petting him, and he was smelled kind of doggy. And then, so the conscious mind went to, and he died. Boom. Disconnect from self. Thought, memory that's true, but only part of the truth. Disconnect from self. So the eidetic mind that we've been exploring today stays with what you see rather than what you're thinking about, which is all history and rational, overly conscious mind. Oh, yes. So, yes, my mother, I'm thinking of a client, my mother lost a child, and she was so depressed when I was born, and she couldn't be available to me, and she was so sad, and my father couldn't bring her out of it. And so I spent my whole life my whole young life trying to make her feel better, and I never could. Nobody ever could, because of what she was suffering from. And so I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm never enough. I can't go out in the world and do what I'm supposed to do. And then we went to an image. We'd go to an image with her, various images where she would experience, because her eidetic mind would take her, something else in herself. Maybe it had happened sometimes in life. Maybe it hadn't happened at all. Maybe it would have happened if mom didn't have her history. But the pathways are there. And because we all come in bigger, right? And then we get smushed. So she's there and she's experiencing a real self. And but my mom, my mom was so sad, and I wasn't enough, back to eidetic consciousness. And that's the work. So when you ask me, Matt, when you asked me a little bit like, what would I tell people to do? I kind of feel stymied because for someone at the level of the people that I work with, it's time to go into that place of the self. That's what they want. The the there are so many good ideas about what to do. And when those aren't enough, that's when I work. That's when my clients come to me. And that's so delicious. It's such a great place to go.
Hmm. Well, I'm all about going deep, and I really like that. And I think that everybody should explore their own self. Pretty much every spiritual master on the planet ever has said, "Look within." And we're in a society, and we're in a world where that's not the common thing. And
Yes.
so, what I'm curious about in this process is, if a listener is out there, how do they use the process? I'm also curious if you can give any history on, like, like why it comes from. Well, you did a little bit about the Greek thing, but I also know there's some references to Sufi. So, like basically just if you're on listening, like how can you apply
Mhm.
this stuff, and how does it work? Like if they want to just give like a sample,
Mhm.
or like explore a little bit,
Mhm.
give it a try.
Okay. I'll tell you, I'll address both of those. So first, in thinking about how to help people to stop interfering with themselves, with their conscious mind, with their cognitive understanding of the world, which is so narrow, I explored it a lot and I wrote a spiritual manifesto, which is using eidetics, understanding from the eidetic point of view how to boost your spiritual practice so it filters into your life more. So that is available for people. It's at www.myspiritualmanifesto.com. Now, what you'll get to see in the spiritual manifesto is you'll get to understand more deeply how you're stopping yourself with your mind, more of what we were talking about today, how that's affecting this kind of spillover of your practice into your life, how it limits the spillover and the contact with the higher self and the higher consciousness. There's also stories in there about how, like, there's one woman who's pushing herself in her business, just pushing and pushing and pushing. And she hates what she's doing. It's not working. She's not being successful. And she's being exactly like her mother in terms of the pushing, and she can't stop herself. So I talk about that and how that relates to the spiritual contact with self. And there's a way inside the manifesto to have what you just asked about, a more personal experience of what's going on inside you, the person reading, and how the deeper consciousness is both how you're stopping yourself, probably very unconscious, in many cases, very unconsciously, and then how to get through it. There's a place where you can have a deeper experience, virtually, actually, and way to contact me. So all of that's in myspiritualmanifesto.com. And then also there will be updates, because what I'm doing is I'm taking spiritual teachers that mean a lot to me, like for example Ram Dass or Muji, and Pema Chodron, and I'm taking their writings and I'm exploring the connection between their writings and eidetics, and I'm kind of bringing it home into a practical connection between the two. So that'll be future installments. Then in terms of Sufi, the connection with Eidetics and Sufi has to do with the fact that Dr. Hassan's father was a Sufi master. Dr. Hassan's the father of Eidetics, and he's my mentor. And his father in India was a Sufi master. And one of the beautiful stories actually about Dr. Hassan is his grandfather saw way back when, right? Way back when, that the schools in India were shaping little Akhtar in ways that were limiting him. So his grandfather took him out of school and they lived in a forest for a little while where little Akhtar ran free. And I mean, with his grandfather there, but he had the freedom to be with nature, to be himself, to explore, to be on his own. and to feel all of that and have all of that instead of the restrictions that school involved. So that really shaped him in terms of his mind being so much more open than so many people's. In the same way, I might be wrong about this detail, but I'm pretty sure that Buckminster Fuller, who invented the geodesic dome and who invented an electric car back in the early 1900s, he was a phenomenal teacher. Pretty sure he didn't talk way beyond the time that he should have been talking. He was just silent. I'm pretty sure that was him. But there are a number of very um, huge thinkers that had something different happen, like they didn't talk for a while, or they couldn't read the board in school, or like Dr. Asen, he had a chance to be himself. That early openness really shifted his ability to take in something different than common sense understandings, which, if you look around the world, haven't done us a whole lot of good up till now, in many ways.
Yeah, definitely. Well, education's a whole, worm in itself, and I
Yes.
definitely have appreciation for the people who are teaching. And there's a lot of beautiful people in that
Yeah.
industry. However, studying it from a purely psychological point of view and from my own personal research, is due for a massive upgrade.
Yeah.
And the way that our consciousness is developed, 0 to 3, we're like, we can't even have a critical factor. I think it's a 5 actually. You're not, everything goes in. You can't stop whatever it is. You can't filter it. You can't. It's just all going in. And then so these are the times to empower people with the belief of just like self-worth, understanding, exploration, how to learn. And so the problem is when you become an adult, you're just like, I'm stuck in the mind. And that's what a school is a lot about, is remembering facts for that moment in time, which is not real intelligence. There's like, yeah, it's memory. That's great. But there's like emotional intelligence, there's imagination, there's connection with the body. There's, you know what I mean? There's just like, there's a whole world.
Yes.
And a lot of these masters obviously had a little bit of a different operating
Yes.
opportunity to think. You have to be able to think outside the box. You need to know how to do, both
Yes.
sides, right and left. You need to have math, engineering, science, good quality math, engineering, and science. And you also need the other side, the artistic, the imagination, the meditation, the body, and things like that, and the
Yeah.
ability to imagine something else, because that's all we're doing here is imagining something else, creating something else, and exploring. And I think that the sad thing is that a lot of people don't think that they can create because they're stuck in the mental loop. They're stuck in those limitations. They're
Mhm.
stuck in the anxiety, depression, the memory of being a kid or whatever, and they can't get out of it. And they can't see what they're capable of. They can't
Yes.
even imagine it
Yes.
because they're basically in this it's like fear and survival. And
Mhm.
so each and every day you got to go get food because there's always a threat. You don't have enough money in the bank, so there's this threat of not being able to buy food or pay your bills. So in threat mode, you are not in imagination, I can create anything mode. I am a
Yes.
divine creator and I can do whatever I want and I'm magical as I am. It's a crazy thought,
Yeah.
but that's the truth. You are
Yeah.
totally fine. So yeah, that's what that made me think
When
about.
when you're I notice it myself. I totally agree with you. When you're less stressed, if you when you get connected to the part of you that's less stressed, that's cooler, the ideas just flow. They just come in. Like, even if you're not thinking about a specific thing that you want to resolve or solve or handle differently, just like, wow, that was a great idea. But because the overheated mind, which is where most of us are these days, just like constant running and constant input and constant stress, that literally heats up the mind. And when the mind, there's some things that we work with that, and when it is as one way of working with it, but the mind, once the mind is cooler, then it settles in, and what it really can do starts to come up, just like what you're saying.
Yeah, that's step one. That's step one is stopping the cooling system. It's like you try to use your computer and you open up every single program that's and everything, and just like, okay, imagine everything, and it's like overheating, but you can't think because the thing is, a
Yes.
threat is immediate.
Yeah.
And if you can't get out of this threat and fear, it's consistently, that's what's basically, of any single thing that can come into your consciousness. If I say like a purple rhinoceros unicorn, you have to think about what the heck that is. And I just plopped it in just by listening to this sound.
Mhm.
So as you're going about your day, anything could pop in there. But
Yeah.
what happens is people believe that they have no control over this fear loop, this anxiety, this depression, this limitation, this
Yeah.
uncertainty, all this. It just keeps popping into the consciousness when it could be anything. It could be the
Yeah.
unicorn, it could be I am safe, it could be I don't know, the Bee Gees. It doesn't matter what it is, but the way that we're operating through threat and fear all the time, that's the thing. And that space is very small. You take basically the entire ocean and you filter it through like the head of a needle. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
I do.
it's the tiniest thing. And so that's where our consciousness and our free will and who we are um, really comes into play, because you do have a right with what you put in there. And it starts with the awareness of what's in there. Just start paying attention to what is being dropped in. And if you just start looking at it like, oh, why do I keep dropping in like I'm not good enough? Why do I keep dropping in like I don't have enough money? Okay, great. Like, what would happen if I didn't have enough money? What would happen? And you start exploring these ideas, and you make the pin that little bit bigger, and then you start to look at the root of the problem. And as you start to, you're basically going in and diving deep. And then when you start to do that, you realize it's not as terrifying as you think. That you are taken care of, and there's just as much. There's more truth in the fact that you are taken care of, that you're eternal, that you're infinite, that you can do anything, than you are worthless, you suck, you can't do anything, stay in anxiety and fear. That's the mind, because that little tiny pin drop has no idea the ocean. It's part of the ocean. It is the ocean, and so it doesn't have the capability to understand that. And that's where kind of like that Zen surrender type of stuff is like you can't know it. It's like a 2-year-old kid trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with
Mhm.
like 100 million sides. It's not happening. Well,
Mhm.
it could happen somehow, but not likely.
Yeah, if a person can truly take in those ideas and actually experience them, then they're on a whole different path. The I think the difficulty comes in when they know there's truth in what and there's I totally agree with you, knowing there's truth and yet not being able to knowing how to truly stop the mind because the fear is so strong. Let's say a financial fear, right? So I was working with someone the other day, one of my mastermind clients, and she's doing really well, and yet it's not coming in as fast as she needs it. And she was spinning. She was really anxious and pumped up. And she wanted that to decrease, and she wanted her to be able to attend to the things she needed to attend to. But she was so scared about the money that she couldn't drop in. She knew she needed to, but she couldn't. And when the fear's so strong, when we have a good idea and we know it's a good idea, like relax Wendy before the Facebook live podcast, sure, that's a great idea, but like, yeah, leave me alone because I can't do it. The when she was able to, we actually worked with the way she was identifying practicing being like her mother in a certain situation with her father, where her mother's strength wasn't able to come through. She kept deferring in these ways that were really dangerous for the family to the father's bad practices. Let's just leave it at that. The father was doing these things that were very harmful for the family, and the mother wasn't standing up. And so my client, having seen that, was also not standing up in lots of ways to her staff, to um, the way things were coming in to the organization. There were a lot of things that to her life, really, to how her life was getting shaped. And so we actually worked imagistically and eidetically with the way she was being like her mother, to her horror. And that allowed her, the really interesting part of that was that allowed her to experience herself calmer, to actually experience a lot more strength coming from herself. And in that strength, when she began to feel it, much like you felt happiness today, Matt, as she began to feel that, then she started to sense a different way of operating as being possible in her. Whereas before, she was so immersed in it that she couldn't talk herself out of it. And I'm really talking about the parts of ourselves that we know better, but we can't take ourselves there, no matter how much we, quote unquote, know. That's the level that is really actually fascinating and possible to change.
So can you give an example of that? Like, let's just say I'm about to do a double backflip on my snowboard, and I'm in the Olympics, and I'm about to perform, and I'm stressed out, or I'm in anxiety and I can't get out of it, or I've got this big board meeting, or I'm stressed out from work or whatever. How do you use that process to snap yourself out of it in a different way, other than straight up um, consciousness or some other
Yeah.
other
So,
thinking?
okay, well, I mean, I could do it. I don't know if you want to do it right now. We've gone kind of long
Well,
time.
not I'm more interested in how somebody would empower themselves to do it. So if I'm teaching this to an athlete,
Mhm,
for me, if you can't do it on your own,
mhm,
then there's a limitation in the process. So how do I empower myself at any time? So I can get myself out of those states
mhm,
through different processes.
mhm,
It takes a minute, but I can do it. And
mhm,
so if I'm teaching an athlete that is hey, you're about to do the Olympics, or you're going to try a trick. One of my athletes, they fell on a front flip. And so on a motorcycle, so if he is unable to get into a powerful state of mind before trying a trick that can literally kill him, he shouldn't do it.
right.
So how do we shift? How can you shift if it is possible, if you can use that tech? Maybe you can't. Maybe it's like a one-on-one thing, and you kind of like do it in a safe space, and you know what I mean? Like, oh, today I couldn't
Mhm,
get out of this space, so now I'll come and then I'll look at that when it's a safe space, just like you don't meditate in the middle of a street. There's certain spaces for certain activities. I don't
yeah.
drop in and do that. And so maybe it's more of a process. I was just curious
Yeah.
if there is a way where I'm like, Matt, I'm about to go speak or do this thing, and I can't snap myself out of it, so I can pop myself and use this process in right there, no matter what the catalyst
Yeah.
is. It's like, you don't want it. You're not thinking yourself out of it. So
Right.
maybe you can. So that's what I'm curious, if somebody can do it in their own way.
If they know how to work with the images, then they could, because there are many things that they could work with. But to just give like here's what you could do eidetically, I couldn't do that right here, right now, because it's too complicated. It depends on the person. It depends on their images. It depends what their mind is doing. It depends who they're identifying with. It depends on so many different aspects, because the work is very, very, very unique to each person and what stops them. So I'd love to give you an answer that would work for everyone. I don't have that. I don't have
So
that.
when you begin to understand, let's say you understood that, like yourself, you understand the process more. Once
Mhm.
you have an understanding of the framework of like how it works and the processes and the things come up, then you can indeed empower yourself to do that process, kind of like you did before the show, or do you always need like a helper, or you just need a basic understanding of the process first?
You need a pretty deep understanding of the process because, like you said over and over today, we're working with our mind, which is very complicated and very obstructing. And each person's mind stops us. We all stop ourselves in different ways. There's a number of ways that we do, but it's all our own particular way. And so you're blind, what I call insistently blind, to some of the deeper places, some of the places that are so ingrained that we don't even see them. And so it's like, Tiger Woods or, the places that are the most insidious, we won't see. And to answer the other part of your question, my clients, they work with their images all the time on their own, all the time. And that's what takes them far. So the question always is, like I said, you can do this work a little, well, I didn't say this, but you can do this work for a little bit in a very focused way and get what you want and stop. Or you can be into continuous expansion and see what door opens next. And that's up to the person. So yes, of course, once you understand how to work with an image, of course you can. And not as long as you are open to seeing where you stop yourself. And that takes a lot of courage and honesty, a lot of self-honesty.
Yeah.
So let me just say back to what, as I said, many people today who saw their image while you were doing yours saw a really negative situation. And I know the first time that I saw images, and for a long time afterwards, all my images of my parents were negative. And I started seeing how much was going on inside me that I didn't know was going on. And that required a degree of self-honesty that really helped me, because it was true. I was operating in the ways that I was seeing in the image, not in history, but right now. That's what, and it was showing me that. So again, the work isn't for everyone. Those are what my clients want.
Yeah, no, and I can see that too for sure about the just that's where guides are helpful in a lot of different things, because we don't want to look at those doors and we don't want to pry them open. I had an experience, helping a friend and client of mine on that, and I was like, you got to look at this, and then finally they were able to look at it through something different, but they did, and it was it was just something that needed to be processed. So sometimes we just need help. And doing that. And yeah, the only reason why I ask is because I'm an explorer of techniques and try them. And so if I have the capability and capacity to test it, I will test it. And then I will know, what the result is. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your work and doing what you're doing. Like, I can't imagine how many people you've helped with like a full on 100% capacity waitlist, and then to continue to explore like new techniques, things that are producing the results. And then the people will tell you, if they're getting the results and they're getting help. That's kind of how you know, and you also know by testing yourself. So
Sure.
I think that's interesting and exciting. Before we go,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, is there anything that you wish that I had asked that would be a great question, or anything that you want to leave the listeners with? And you can feel free to elaborate as long as you wish.
I don't feel like we've left anything essential on the table. I feel like you were challenging, and also you were, and
Sorry.
that's great. No, great. Because the mind will challenge. It will. And so it was real, which is what I wanted. And I guess what I want to say is I really hope that those who listened and connected with what you were doing, like take a look for themselves at their own image, consider getting the My Spiritual Manifesto, and really take in, there's so many more places we can go. And there's so much more to us than what we think there is, even now. And then in an hour from now, and next year, there's more. And don't, my big thing is go beyond the lip service. Like, be real, be honest with yourself.
I could not agree more. And that is really hard. So if you're trying to even just try to do it, even just be 5% more real than you were yesterday. That's the
True.
incredible advice. And it is super, super hard. So you could do it. You're amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate that. And just really beautiful thoughts. I'm going to check out your spiritual manifesto. I didn't get it downloaded. I didn't have time to look at it. So I'll go through that and just stay in touch. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. See you in the next one.